never set out to be a podcaster. I never set out to be in wellness or self-help. Really just came from a personal endeavor in my 20s to know myself and to force myself to do so vulnerably. And, it's been a beautiful story, I suppose, of pulling on that thread of passion, and that's led to books. I started it in response to my own life. I felt like many people do, I'm 37, but at the time I was, 29. Like many people do in their 20s, you don't have direction, you don't have clarity, and that's fine. I am just a very type A person, and I was very motivated at a certain point in my career that I was working at that time to force myself to have perspective. Very frustrated by the fact that I felt like I was one person in my career, one person here, one person there, that I didn't have a strong sense of self, and that was really aggravating to me. And the motivation came from that. So yeah, it could be living someone else's life, only following expectations, kind of that line of logic that was really frustrating to me because I was optimism. How do we help people be more optimistic? And not like butterflies and rainbows, everything will be okay, manifest your best life. Optimism. It's optimism through the lens of how we speak to ourselves. And it's how we speak to ourselves through the lens of the words that we choose. So a lot of my work is helping people come up with better vocabularies for the way that they describe their feelings. Is 100% a muscle. Like the more you do it, the better you get at identifying how you feel. Step one. And then step two is how do you then speak to yourself about that feeling? And I know that sounds like a small thing, but so much of wellness nowadays is focused on sitting in feelings, which is amazing, right? That is the purpose of meditation, for instance, is just feel. Don't be judgmental, just feel it. But I think there is a missing practicality that comes from step two, which is, okay, we sit in these feelings, we identify the feeling, we get really, really good at allowing ourselves to feel and be in it. A part of me feels nervous, okay, valid, but the reality is I'm really excited right now. And that is an energy shift, right? It's honoring the feeling, it's identifying it as a part, not my whole, and then it's shifting into something a bit more positive. And that's an interesting example too, because most people do confuse sometimes nerves and excitement. Those two feelings very much overlap.
What's up, everybody? This is Simon. On this episode of The Ideal Hour, I have Case Kenny, who is an author. He's also a podcast host. Now, this podcast is the top 25 podcast on Apple. It is New Mindset, Who Dis? I love the title of the podcast. And the book he has out is That's Bold of You. It's basically about achieving your best mindset possible, getting rid of labels. Case also has 1.2 million followers on Instagram. Case, thanks for coming on The Ideal Hour. Let's talk about mindfulness and how important it is today more than ever.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Let's do that. I love chatting about it.
Excellent. So what inspired you to start the podcast, which has grown, pretty rapidly?
Yeah, so I've been doing it for a while. I've been doing the podcast for 7 years. I started it in 2018. SiriusXM Media picked it up 3 years ago. It was, the long story short is I started it in response to my own life. I felt like many people do, I'm 37, but at the time I was, 29. Like many people do in their 20s, you don't have direction, you don't have clarity, and that's fine. I am just a very type A person, and I was very motivated at a certain point in my career that I was working at that time to force myself to have perspective and to say, why am I doing this? Why do I feel this way? And to force myself to say, well, this is why, and this is the truth, and these are the words that align with who I am and what I feel, as opposed to just following other people's examples, kicking things under the rug. And so I started it as like a creative, vulnerable endeavor to know myself. And the rest is somewhat history in the sense that that is mindfulness in a nutshell, right? The art of exploring your feelings, being non-judgmental of them, using to fuel your actions. And like many things in life, it is a muscle. I've done 700 plus episodes. I've done thousands and thousands and thousands of pages and outlines and articles. And it's really helped me when it comes to the idea of exploring mindfulness, when it comes to the idea of how I speak to myself. So it really started off from a very, I never set out to be a podcaster. I never set out to be in wellness or self-help. Really just came from a personal endeavor in my 20s to know myself and to force myself to do so vulnerably. And, it's been a beautiful story, I suppose, of pulling on that thread of passion, and it's led to books. And, obviously I quit that job to do this full time. And yeah, it's been very fulfilling in that respect, but it started there.
Did you hit like a breaking point, or were you kind of living someone else's life before you said, hey, I really need to rebrand myself or my mind or re-understand?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a sense, sure. I mean, I like when I say type A, like I was very frustrated by the fact that I felt like I was one person in my career, one person here, one person there, that I didn't have a strong sense of self. And that was really aggravating to me. And the motivation came from that. So yeah, I mean, it could be living someone else's life, only following expectations, kind of that line of logic that was really frustrating to me, because I was really good at my job. I worked sales for like 8 years at this company. And it was weird because I could look at my sales job and be like, well, I know exactly what to do. I know exactly what it means to be a good salesperson and a good manager. But that didn't translate to other areas of life where I felt lost and like I was a follower. And I didn't like that fact that I felt like one person here, another person there. I was like, I want to be the same person on the inside and out, in my job, in my career, as a partner, as a brother, as a son. And so that like angst, that enthusiasm to be able to say, this is my truth, in a sense, that was the motivation.
Nowadays, I assume you help others out with their motivation and their clarity that they need in their life. Is that a rewarding thing for you? Like, does it keep you going, and does it keep you motivated in your own path? Because I know there's a lot of people, especially nowadays, they feel lost, or they feel like they have to compare themselves to their friends on Instagram, what their parents think of them, the education levels, getting into different schools, whatever it may be. How does it feel for you to kind of coach these people and motivate them? And what do you see as a common kind of issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. I mean, I'm an internet guy, I suppose. It's everything. Like, I do a lot of in-person work with large groups and organizations and communities. And I mean, that's everything to help people break down their walls through mindfulness. And, I occupy a very specific realm when it comes to this stuff. I would never consider myself like a motivational speaker or a coach. The expertise that I bring to the table, the drum that I will beat until the day I die is optimism. How do we help people be more optimistic? And not like butterflies and rainbows, everything will be okay, manifest your best life optimism. It's optimism through the lens of how we speak to ourselves. And it's how we speak to ourselves through the lens of the words that we choose. So a lot of my work is helping people come up with better vocabularies for the way that they describe their feelings. And that sounds boring, but it is utterly life-changing when you could sit someone down and say, how do you feel? They spit out a word, and then we break it down and we're like, well, that's the wrong word. And because it's the wrong word, it's been holding you back. And because it's been holding you back, you haven't been able to step into this action or this mindset. And that is where optimism lives. So just through like breaking down the way that people speak to themselves is so gratifying and so rewarding to see people just through a simple session realize that, yeah, we've been borrowing a lot of language that isn't true to us. We use language that is very oriented with permanence as opposed to transitional phases of life. And that work to me is great, for one, because I don't have all the answers, but I can provide guidance and questions that help people find their own. So, I think in wellness, it's amazing when anyone contributes, of course, but there's a lot of fluff, and there's a lot of just words and things and that. And, I never want to find myself in a position where I'm telling someone how to live their life. I want to bring expertise and guidance that helps them figure that out. And the lens of language and mindfulness, to me, has done the trick. And it's really great to see people be like, oh, wow, I've been using this word to describe a feeling, but that's not the right one. And that's so gratifying.
Well, I'm glad you're not one of those life coaches. There's so many on Instagram nowadays. It's they come and go, and they yell at you, and they there's some funny ones out there, and I've seen some try to come on the podcast
for sure.
What in terms of like labels. Let's get back to that. How often do you see that people put a label on themselves, maybe even from their parents, their upbringing, where they are stuck in some type of label or a specific word, like they're called a loser or they're called, they're doubting themselves. What is that? Does that go back to childhood, or are you dealing more with individuals that are just kind of maybe not performing to their best?
I mean, I think it always at some points goes back to childhood or at some point in adolescence. Like we're not learning new things when we're 30 and 40 and beyond. So it's always rooted somewhere and then reinforced throughout adulthood. And great topic for a therapist to dive deep into that. But yeah, I mean, usually I find it that, someone was called something early on in their life, like you're too loud, you're too quiet, you're too this, you're too that. And those people, we just allow it to become our identity. And then we find support of that. And then we get further in life and it's just become who we are. And there's that, right? Just, simple psychology of cause and effect and feedback loop. And, don't think of a yellow car, you think of a yellow car. Don't think, that you're an anxious person, you become this anxious identifier. There's always that, right? We reinforce through other people's labels to us. It becomes our label to us. It becomes this self-fulfilling loop. There's that. And then there just becomes like when we don't have great introspection of ourselves and we're trying to say, I feel a certain way. I'm feeling this way. We just literally choose the wrong word, right? So like anxious, for instance, everyone has anxiety these days. And that's not bad, certainly not good, but it's not a bad thing. But is that the right word? Like I find so often someone will come to me and they'll say like, let's just go with the anxious example. They'll say, man, I'm an anxious person. And we have to back up so far just from the way that they're describing that. You're an anxious person. Your whole identity is that of being an anxious person. We have to break this down into parts, for one. A lot of the work is around the idea of parts in a whole, that there are different parts of you. How can we get people to say, okay, I'm not an anxious person. A part of me feels anxious. But then it's the better question of, is anxious the right word? Have we done enough specific introspection to say that the feeling is actually that word anxious? Is it, well, maybe you're feeling uneasy or overstimulated or uncertain or indecisive or fatigued? Like getting as specific as possible really frees us from these blanket terms, anxious, anxiety, these terms of which of course are directional and helpful, but I've found usually it's specific things that are making you feel anxious. And that is how we get to the root cause and change and evolution and optimism. So a lot of my work has been, okay, well, who told you, for one, that you're this way? And then two, in other scenarios, why are you using this word? And how can we break it down? And that's why I really like, there's many different sides to wellness and mindfulness and optimism. There's a very spiritual, esoteric side, and then there's a practical side. How are we speaking to ourselves? Literal vocabulary. A lot of my work is around emotional vocabulary. What are the actual words? And I find it to be very helpful, and it actually gives people oh, okay, I'm thinking about this differently. And sometimes just a slightly different sauce, a different side of the same coin. That is what helps people overcome these labels that have become identities.
Wow. It's almost like they go from a broad perspective, to your point, with feeling anxious or whatever, but you find the root cause or a more detailed version of what they're going through to address the problem or to get them past the hump, so to speak.
Yeah. It's forest and trees, right? There's something in therapy circles that's becoming popular nowadays called IFS, internal family systems, which is basically the idea that when it comes to a human being, there are different parts of us, right? We're not just a human being. There are different parts of us. There are the parts that come from the past, to your point about childhood and adolescence. These are the parts that are trying to save you from future harm. They're trying to protect you. They're trying to push you. They're trying to pull you. And it's all this push and pull that, in theory is helpful, but a lot of it is self-sabotaging. A lot of it is numbing. A lot of it is pulling back. And then there's what in IFS is referred to as self. Self is the divine, compassionate, control, clarifying self. It is the essence of who you are. It is our job through reflection to create harmony and balance. We walk around saying, I am anxious. I am stuck. I am overwhelmed. I am hopeless. I am unlovable. We are not paying respect to those parts. So we can't break free of the permanence that saying I am anxious creates. So a lot of it starts with understanding that there are different parts of us. A lot of those parts are rooted in adolescence and childhood, great topics for a therapy session to dive into. But the way that we make that real is with human vocabulary and choosing to say, instead of I am sad, a part of me feels sad. Well, what part? Where's the part coming from? Is sad the right word? Maybe it's not sad. Maybe it's you're feeling disconnected. Maybe you're feeling grieving. Maybe you're feeling frustrated. And then we can go from there.
How many typical sessions, someone comes into you and says, hey, or comes to you, excuse me, says, well, I'm not feeling my best. I'm not performing my best. I feel sad, whatever it may be. How many sessions does it normally take to overcome something? I know it varies per person, but is it a quick kind of, I read this book, now I'm moving on, or it could really prolong?
It only takes one, man. It just takes one. No, I mean, so I don't do like one-on-one coaching. So all my sessions are large group sessions. So I do it for the NFL, I'll do it for Soho House, I'll do it for corporate groups, large group oriented clarity sessions through optimism. To answer your question more seriously, I mean, this type of work, really what I'm describing in its most practical form is like guided journaling, like taking these ideas and writing them down, which in my world should be an everyday practice. So if you truly want to have a better relationship with yourself, if you want to have more clarity and enthusiasm and optimism for life, you should try to journal for 10 minutes a day. Journaling can take many different forms. It doesn't always have to be a serious, solemn writing in my diary type vibe. It could just literally be, I've been feeling this way. Let's break it down and move on from there. So, I always encourage people to do this as a daily practice. My sessions are more prescriptive in the sense of I take people through a very specific workflow to get the juices flowing, and then they go from there. But yeah, really, to my point in the beginning, like this kind of thing is 100% a muscle. Like the more you do it, the better you get at identifying how you feel. Step one. And then step two is how do you then speak to yourself about that feeling? And I know that sounds like a small thing, but so much of wellness nowadays is focused on sitting in feelings, which is amazing, right? Mm-hmm. That is the purpose of meditation, for instance, is just feel. Don't be judgmental, just feel it. But I think there is a missing practicality that comes from step two, which is, okay, we sit in these feelings, we identify the feeling, we get really, really good at allowing ourselves to feel and be in it. But then how do we speak back to ourselves about that? So it's not just ruminating. We actually can make something of it, make something powerful of it, use it as a catalyst. So that's where a habit of journaling I found can be utterly life-changing in that respect.
I think that's amazing advice. Journaling, even for decision making, I feel like if you just cut a paper in half and wrote out all the positives and negatives about a decision, it would like clear it up. I do it all the time. Yeah. And everybody I think gets lost. So what inspired you to write your book? That's bold of you. The opposite of settling. Like what was the goal of that? I know the podcast became very popular and that kind of led one thing to another, I would imagine. But
yeah, I would say, so I wrote That's Bold of You. I have another book coming out called The Opposite of Settling. Both of those books came from very specific moments that I was like, wow, like this is something that I think could be impactful. For That's Bold of You, I read, and it's the first or second chapter, called The Beautiful Mess Effect. I read this research that was done called The Beautiful Mess Effect, which are these social scientists that basically set out to answer the question of why do we love vulnerability in other people and why do we despise it in ourselves? Mm-hmm. Vulnerability meaning different things, right? Not just like sensitivity and being vulnerable emotionally with someone, but like vulnerable things, being weird, being eccentric, being passionate, being too this, being too that. Why do we, generally speaking, say we love that in other people, but then when it comes to us, we can't be that way, right? Most people would say, yes, I love a weird friend. I love having a friend who would do anything, who will embarrass themselves. Yes, of course, I love honest, open, emotional friends and people. But then when we turn the mirror in ourselves, we'll say, well, no one else would appreciate those qualities in us. So these scientists were basically setting out to showcase the hypocrisy when it comes to why do we think my vulnerability isn't liked? And they basically showed that it is liked. It's in our heads. It is unfair self-judgment. And I was like, that is so interesting, the way that we say one thing and yet we don't apply the same standard to ourselves. I was like, man, that is a powerful truth about life, right? Why do we put ourselves in one category and everyone else in another one? I feel like that's a pretty limiting way to live. So I read that study and I wrote the entire book based around the idea of that unfair self-judgment, unfair labels. And then I read another, this woman wrote a book about, she interviewed a bunch of people who had been through near-death experiences, right? You kind of die and then you come back. You see the light, you go to the light and then you come back. And, she talked to a lot of them and said, like, what did you see? What was that moment like? And, what we would normally expect from that type of conversation is, yeah, flashing light. And I saw all of my mistakes laid bare. And I was like, oh, man. But really what they saw is, yeah, in a form, they kind of did see mistakes and regrets. But the thing that they outlined as their biggest regret was unfair self-judgment that they had levied upon themselves when they were alive, right? Thinking that they were to this or to that, or not this enough for that, whatever it may be. That was the regret when those people passed and then came back. And I was just so touched by that, right? This way that we are unfair to ourselves. We can't change if people are fair to us, but we can change how unfair or fair we are to ourselves when it comes to judgment. And I was just very motivated by that. And I think it's a bold thing. That's why that book was called That's Bold of You. It's a bold thing to push back on labels. It's a bold thing to push back against beliefs you've had for decades, potentially. It's a bold thing to show up as your weirdest, most vibrant and real self. And the rest kind of just flowed from there. Just a very uplifting look at labels.
To your point, self-judgment sounds like such a heavy weight that prevents you from really enjoying life and maybe accomplishing things that you really want to do. And, to be honest with you, I judge myself all the time. It's kind of crazy, and I'm sure everybody does. And to get over that and maybe kind of change the blueprint or not understand it's okay to live up to a different path that someone maybe has set out for you is okay. It's a big thing to push back on it. That's wonderful. Nowadays, when you do these public speaking events, when you coach, say you mentioned the NFL, I know you've been on the Today Show and Good Morning America and all these other channels. Are you nervous? Do you ever go into one of those and then judge yourself after, I should have said this, I should have done this? Or
yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. I'm not the world's greatest orator in any sense, but that's a great question too. For instance, getting up there, I always do get nervous. Like, who wouldn't get nervous when you have 200, 400 people staring at you? I always get nervous, but I always say, practice what you preach. So my exercise, right? If I were to get up there right beforehand and turn to my girlfriend and be like, man, I am nervous right now. Oof, what a horribly limiting way to express your energy towards that moment. Reframe would be as follows. I would say, hey, man, a part of me feels nervous right now. We're not trying to control our emotions with the way we speak about them, right? We're not being toxic positive. A part of me feels nervous. Okay, valid. But the reality is I'm really excited right now. Mm-hmm. And that is an energy shift, right? It's honoring the feeling. It's identifying it as a part, not my whole. And then it's shifting into something a bit more positive. And that's an interesting example too, because most people do confuse sometimes nerves and excitement. Those two feelings very much overlap. In the instance when I get to go on the Today Show in front of millions of people potentially and talk about something I'm passionate about, I am so freaking excited. But the reality of it, there's a lot of cameras and people and makeup. Yeah, I'm nervous too. Those two things can coexist. Where does our focus go? That is the question. So I've gotten much better at that, of saying a part of me feels this way, and then coming up with that second phrase through introspection, through journaling, through just practice and reps. But that's a great example that I think is really practical, and a lot of people probably go through. And it starts, with our ability to reframe just slightly.
I love that. Recognize what's happening and then say a but and then shift the focus. That's
yes, the power of but.
The power of but. That's going to be a new book for you.
It could be.
What do you do? I know you're busy. I know you got a following. You're writing books. You're doing these speaking events. How do you keep your mind focused with everything that's going on, organization-wise, body, mind? Do you work out? Do you make sure that you're, how do you keep your effort at 100% or
Yeah, I mean, I
close to it?
think I think there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, like I'm an author first and foremost, so like I live in words and ideas and inspiration. That can be overwhelming at times, as any part of anyone's job can be. You're overwhelmed if you're a project manager, if you're an attorney, if you're whatever. For me, it's all of these things that I can write about and react to, and just the infinite possibility of being an author. That is my overwhelm. So for me, being organized is a big part of it, in the sense of like, don't just let it live up here.
Mhm.
Put it down on paper so it has some permanence to it. So I'm not always chasing the butterfly effect of ideas that I've had. So for me, I'm spending a lot of time just reacting to life, writing it down, making notes, having a storage system of sorts for things that I'd like to talk about or react to. That way it lives here, but I can live here, right? So it doesn't become a whole confusing ethos of how I approach life. So there's that. There's also, just knowing like how I work best. Like I work best in the morning, more or less, like between 11 and 1, with like 2 coffees in me and house music. Like
Okay.
that's my creative zone of genius. Some coffee, some caffeine, some uplifting music. There's a lot to be said about music. And that keeps me locked and focused. Usually try to work out midday or so. And then, I spend my evenings marinating on future topics. I think great creatives and authors, of which I'm striving to be one, they spend a lot of time just marinating, like marinating the steak. Like it takes time. Like you can't force yourself to be productive in the immediate. And I think that's where a lot of overwhelm and frustration comes from. It's take a crack at it, step back, let it marinate, go back to it. Let the catalyst of creativity do its thing. So I do that, and yeah, it works really well for me. Everyone's like, "Oh, work-life balance." I don't really have a balance, because I've been lucky to find the thing that is the thing, that is the life, that is the work, and it's so intrinsically intertwined that I'm grateful to be able to just live amidst that, and I don't really feel the need to escape it, which is great and doesn't work for everyone, but to have that flexibility and freedom. And recently 2.5 years ago, from Chicago to Miami.
Oh yeah.
Vibrant, it's bright,
Uh-huh.
it's warm.
It's alive.
So it's great. Yeah.
Are you in Miami, or?
Yeah. We're on the beach. I mean, look, that's the water right there.
That is nice.
Great.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I have a few guests that have come on, but a lot of friends moving out that way as well. I think the sun, the vibrant colors, opened this new light to Miami, and this new energy that people were taking for granted before as a vacation spot. Now it's like, why not have this as everyday life?
Yeah. I mean, seriously though, I mean, I always used to joke living in Chicago that, it's so miserable here, but whatever. I think it was like soulfully draining, and you don't really realize it sometimes. And obviously not everyone can just up and move cities. I, was fortunate to be able to do that, but weather and climate really changes things in big ways. I know there's a lot to be said about water too. There's a lot of studies that show that just like exposing yourself neurologically, visually to water for a certain amount of time every day, like literally rewires your brain chemistry, just like being around bodies of water. So, whether or not that's true or not, or just kind of a fugazi thing, I don't know. But for me, I feel much more creatively aligned, and yeah, it's been a good decision.
No, being around water. I mean, every place I would consider living has to have water nearby. I don't know if it's a biological thing, but it's interesting. Every place I've invested in had some sort of body of water next to it. I think it's more than just a saying. That's wonderful. I know Miami is a big nightlife. Do you go out a lot with your girlfriend? Are you guys kind of hunkered down, avoiding the scene, or what?
I mean, I would say for the most part, yeah, we don't really go out. However, my girlfriend is a DJ, so we go out professionally, which is a different vibe. Right? We're not going out to get drunk and party. We're going out to her do her thing and me support her, which honestly is the best balance. Like I enjoy that. I like to get out there occasionally, but it's like for 90 minutes and then we're out.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's the best.
in that sense, it's a good way to enjoy life and, not just live in your home, and to be creative, of course. Like we're both creative people, her with music, me with writing. So it's fun.
That's the best. You're not getting trashed and you're not, and you're not wasting a day or the next day, which is great. How did you two meet?
We met in Chicago. And then we moved down here together about 3.5 years ago.
Wonderful. Music, you mentioned it earlier in the podcast. Like my daughters, I refuse to play sad songs in the car or anything of that nature. Yeah. And I think it's such a important thing. I think people dwell on the words that you've constantly mentioned, and like sad music will just bring you down. It's kind of like bad weather. Would you agree? Oh, for sure.
I mean, music is such a catalyst. Yeah. And there's a time for sad music. There's a time for contemplative music. But for me, it's always funny because people are like, oh, like Case is mindfulness, cool. So like we get ambient noise and calming spa music. I'm like, I listen to 130 BPM house music. And like, I've always found dance music, particularly as a genre, to be so conducive to like vulnerable thinking and writing, just based on the structure. Like dance music is structurally built to be break, build, drop, break, build, drop. So it's cyclical in that sense, but there's something very euphoric about a build and a drop and a build and a drop, and it's repetitive and it's comforting. The mind loves repetition, and it really can't put you in a flow state. So for me, I don't think I've ever written anything of merit unless I was listening to some kind of house music, dance music, melodic, progressive dance. So for me, it's a big mindset catalyst. And also just like generally speaking, kind of representative of how I see mindfulness, right? To my point, like mindfulness is all about optimism. Optimism comes from the way you speak to yourself. Mindfulness then, journaling then, is not something that just like sad people do. I feel like sometimes there's this weird stigma like, oh, you're going to write in your diary, like you must be really sad. It's like, no, this is like the same thing as working out. We are increasing our emotional vocabulary so that we love ourselves more, so we have a better relationship with the world. Like this is like putting gas in your engine. This is something you do. It is something to be proud of. It is uplifting. It is positive. It doesn't always have to be this heavy, burdensome thing. And I think the right music really adds some like levity to it that I think sometimes is missing and might be a piece of friction why some people, men maybe, don't do these things, because they're like, oh, that's for sad people. Like, no, put on the right music, give yourself the right thought, and just go to town, and it becomes this very uplifting thing.
As you were speaking, I thought of like your mind and your head as a pressure cooker almost. If you write it out, it's releasing all that steam and it's making you, feel better. Did you guys survive Ultra over there in Miami? It was recent, was it not?
We were there.
You were there.
One of our friends was playing, so we were there supporting him.
Okay.
Crowded.
Was it crazy?
Crowded. Great though.
Okay, good. In terms of if you weren't doing mindfulness, you mentioned you were in sales before. Yeah. What else would you think you'd be doing?
Well, I would probably be doing sales. Like I was pretty good at sales. I think sales taught me a lot. I would say I can give you a bunch of funny answers, but I would say probably sales. Like I think sales is such an entrepreneurial endeavor that it would combine the things that I'm drawn to, which is like starting things from zero, like having difficult goals and overcoming them, and communicating, learning to communicate, and learning to put yourself out there. Like I started as an account executive at this company in 2013, and then rose up through the ranks to be a regional vice president when I left in 2021. So I learned a lot, and it was really rewarding. And sometimes I miss that. Sometimes I miss the grind of sales and a team and things like that. So if things ever imploded and this line of work never worked out, I'd probably go find a challenging place to work and sell some stuff.
Sales is important. I mean, you have to build a brand, get yourself out there, and it's necessary. In terms of, let's talk a little bit about, you've mentioned you were 2.5 years now in Miami or so. Would you ever go back? A lot of people have moved. Some say they moved back. Yeah. Do you go back to Chicago sometimes and go, thank God I moved, or how does it feel?
Yeah, I love Chicago. I still have family there. I think Chicago is a elite city, especially in the spring and summer. We 100%, we go back a lot. We're thinking about buying there and buying here so we can kind of go back and forth. That would be the ultimate goal. I think, a lot of people do move to Miami and then they end up moving back somewhere. Miami could definitely like chew you up and spit you out if you don't have a good relationship with yourself. I say that because Miami is full of a lot of fluff, and Miami is not a real place. There is just things that don't make sense here, and it is not a good barometer for a calm life necessarily, or like a centered life. We have met so many amazing people down here, but there are cultural centers around here around money and image that you just don't want to get lost in. And I find a lot of people that come down here and then leave, it's because they got lost in that, which is fine. No, we all live and learn. But for us, I think we're very grounded and we take advantage of what Miami has to offer for the inner life, which is some of the people, which is the weather, which is the creativity, which is the different cultures. And we take that and we leave the rest over there. And
there's a lot to leave over there. I mean, it's like Los Angeles on drug right now, which is pretty crazy. What was your like aha moment when you felt like you finally made it? Was it launching your book? Was it your podcast blowing up?
Well, as anyone with imposter syndrome would tell you, I don't necessarily feel like I have, quote, made it. I mean, I think certainly leaving my career to do this full time was a big moment, right? I think I come from a pretty traditional family, and my brother went to Harvard as a cardiologist. My mom was an attorney, like traditional career expectations. So I think to leave that behind to do this was like a big, like, I can do this moment. I don't know. I have many moments where they're real life moments where I would bump into someone on the street and they're listening to my podcast, or someone comes up to me and say I changed their life. Just like very sobering and empowering moments of you realize the online work has real world offline impact. And like, to me, that is the like, oh, you have made it in the sense of you are achieving the real objective. I think all those things combined, it's been a slow burn, right? I think it's like always like success happens slowly and then all at once kind of vibe. I feel like that's kind of my thing. And, I've written so much and done the podcast for so long. It's kind of all just become this big, hindsight of like, yeah, this is the right path for me. So I think, my plan moving forward is to write a book every 18 months to 2 years. I really want to, create my throne around books and writing, and then creating tangible, mindful takeaways for people. So, you talked to me in a couple of years. I got a couple more books under my belt. I think there'll be some more evidence that I'm on the right path. But for now, it suits me well.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I think not only is having a podcast probably for you another form of getting stuff out or writing it out kind of thing, and just verbally.
Oh yeah.
Which is therapeutic, and I find that to be the same for me. What advice would you give to people like me or other people that do podcasts to have a successful podcast? Is it repetition? Is it consistency?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the boring stuff. I think the first one is like a strong why do you do it? Like mine has always been for me. It's helped me enormously grow and reinvent myself. Without that, I would get burned out for sure. So it has to come from a place of this is how it helps me. Oh, and it helps other people. Fantastic. To sit down and be like, how can we create a podcast because there's such a great market for it? I feel like that's burnout 101. 2, it is the boring stuff. Like, I think, what is it, like 97% of podcasts never get past episode 10 or something. And it's something incredibly low.
Yeah,
so I mean,
it is.
If you're going to be like, I'm going to start a podcast, then you have to make a solemn promise to yourself that you will release at least 50 episodes or 100 episodes, a year's worth, whatever, something that you could hold yourself to. Only then can you decide if you want to continue or not. You have to give yourself enough yardage to decide that. And then 3, I don't know, man. I'm the majority of my episodes, 99.9% of them are solo hosted. And I think there's something powerful about that personally too. I think also people enjoy hearing from one person. Like that's how you form a relationship. So I don't know. I always encourage podcast hosts to think outside of the traditional guest format, although that's obviously incredible. Pop in with the occasional self-hosted episode, challenge yourself. And I think that teach you a lot about yourself and voice, and people they're invested in you and not just like a guest. So I think those three things combined will keep you going, hopefully past episode 50 or 100.
Oh, that's wonderful advice. And in terms of writing a book, how did you market? Did someone come to you for writing a book, or did you shop your book to a publisher?
So for my first book, I self-published it. I've self-published in a variety of different ways. I think it's the smartest way to go when you're first starting off. My next book, The Opposite of Settling, is with a publisher. And that's for a variety of different reasons that could get pretty granular. But nowadays, there is little to no barrier to become an author. Like even with something like Amazon, you can self-publish on Amazon. You don't have to pay anything. Obviously, they take a big cut of the book, but like you're out there. You're out there with a professional-looking book. And for me, having done self-publishing and hybrid publishing and traditional publishing, it's given me a lot of perspective to know that at the end of the day, you are the person with leverage when it comes to, if you have social following, that's great. But I really think everyone has a book in them, and it'll become much more apparent to you people that you do have a book in you if you start writing your thoughts down. Because to sit down and be like, I'm going to write a book from zero is a very daunting task. I don't think I could ever do that. When I write a book, I am pulling from all the hundreds of thousands of posts and pages that I've written over the years. That is my starting point. So, that's why I encourage people, write things down, whether it's a journal entry or whether it's your thoughts on AI, like whatever, write it down. It could be a blog post. It could be an unpublished post. It could be an anonymous Twitter post. Write things down. That is where your book will come from. And I think you'd be surprised what you can create from a portfolio of work to date. And it's so interesting too. Like once you set your mind, you're like, I think I'm going to write a book about this thing. The world will start giving you such great inspiration for that. Like once I sat down and I was like, I'm going to write this book called The Opposite of Settling, which is coming out soon. I was like, man, I want to write a book about like what it means to not settle and to not settle down in love and to find a partnership that uplifts you in life. I was just beat across the head in such a great way with different examples and different inspiration. Like the book just came together once I decided to write it. So similar with podcasting and commitment, probably be the same idea for writing a book.
It's like the universe gives you ideas. And final question here, Case, if you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice, any point in time in your life, what would that be and why?
Yeah, I'd probably say the following, which is kind of the whole idea of why I think mindfulness is so powerful, the idea of like challenging yourself to think different and talk to yourself differently. The soundbite I always tell people is that, and this is what I would tell my younger self, I would say, Case, there's no right way to live your life, but there's a wrong way. And the wrong way is to think that there's a right way. Basically just a cheeky little tongue twister way of saying that so often in life we're chasing other people's right ways, their definition of happiness and success. And that's fine to be inspired by it. But nowadays it is 100% up to you what that looks like in a relationship, in your career, in your personal life. Your happiness doesn't need to look like other people's. And I think similar to the topic of what people regret, that's up there as well. Chasing other people's definitions, allowing other people's definitions to become ours, allowing their labels of us to become our labels of us. There's no right way, but there is a wrong way. The wrong way is to think that there's a right way. Free yourself to create your own right way, your own emotional vocabulary, your own definition of success and joy and love. And I think you'll spend a lot more time doing that rather than chasing someone else's. And you'll be so much more free to be happy on your own terms. And you won't look back like a lot of people do with that regret of having wasted time. And I think it would serve you really well. So that's what I tell my younger self.
There you have it, folks. Case Kenny on the Ideal Hour podcast, dropping gold for the mind. And thank you. We truly appreciate it for you to come on and share a little bit about yourself, as well as give examples of how to improve your mind and your situation. Thank you, Case.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. That was great.
I hope you had a good time.
I did. Good. I love talking about myself.
Yeah, who doesn't? Thank you.